My son locked me in the house before his wedding and said, hide her somewhere peaceful. We don't need her sad face in the wedding video. I cried in silence, then made one call, and they watched everything fall apart. I woke up early that Thursday morning, 3 days before Michael's wedding. The blue-gray light filtered through my bedroom curtains as I ran my fingers over the pearl brooch on my nightstand. It had belonged to my grandmother, then my mother, and I planned to wear it with my navy dress to Michael's ceremony, as something old from his mother, though Renee probably had her own plans for that tradition. I'd laid everything out the night before, sensible heels, stockings without runs, the dress I bought months ago that Michael had barely glanced at when I showed him the photo. It's fine, Mom, he'd said, his eyes on his phone, probably texting Renee. Everything had been fine since he met her 2 years ago. Not good, not great, just fine. The doorbell rang. As I was fixing my morning tea, Earl Grey with a splash of milk, same as I'd had every morning. Since Harold passed 5 years ago, old habits don't die when your husband does, they just get lonelier. I wasn't expecting anyone, especially not at 7:30 a.m. When I opened the door, Michael stood there, looking uncomfortable in yesterday's clothes, his eyes darting everywhere except my face. Michael? Is everything all right? I wasn't expecting you until tomorrow for the rehearsal dinner. He stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, something he'd never done before. His shoulders were tight, his movements stiff as he paced the entryway. Mom, we need to talk. His voice had that distant quality. Thank you for being here. If this story touched you, please subscribe and don't forget to leave a comment. I read every one of them, and it's how I see just how far our stories are reaching. I come to recognize the one he used when he was repeating something Renee had told him to say. Of course, dear, let me pour you some tea. No tea. This won't take long. He finally looked at me, a flash of something like guilt crossing his face before it hardened again. Renee and I have been talking. She's worried about you. My hand stilled on the kettle. Worried about me? Whatever for. You've been different since Dad died. Quieter, more withdrawn. I set the kettle down carefully. I'm 70 years old, Michael. My husband of 43 years is gone. I'm not withdrawn. I'm grieving, still. Sometimes. He waved his hand dismissively. It's been 5 years, Mom. Grief doesn't punch a time clock. Michael, he sighed heavily, like I was being difficult on purpose. The point is, Renee thinks we think that the wedding might be too much for you, all those people, all that excitement. I felt the first flutter of unease in my stomach. I appreciate the concern, but I'm perfectly capable of attending my only son's wedding. I've been looking forward to it for months. Michael's eyes slid to the door, then back to me. That's just it. Renee's worried you might get emotional. She says you always make things about yourself. The accusation stung like a slap. When have I ever? The engagement party, he interrupted. You cried during the toast. Because I was happy for you. Renee's mother said you were trying to get attention. I stared at my son, the stranger wearing Michael's face, parroting cruel words about his own mother. Michael, what's really going on here? He reached into his pocket and pulled out his keys, including the spare to my house that I had given him after Harold died. We think it's better if you sit this one out. The room seemed to tilt sideways. Sit out your wedding, Michael. You can't be serious. It's just one day. You can see the photos after. I reached for his arm. Michael, this isn't you talking. This is Renee. She's never liked me. And now she's trying to. His face darkened. Don't blame Renee for this. She's just looking out for me, for us. All you do is criticize her. I have never. You don't have to say it out loud, Mom. It's in your eyes every time you look at her. I took a step back, stunned by the venom in his voice. Michael, please, let's talk about this rationally instead of answering. He moved quickly through the house, checking windows, closing blinds. I followed him, confusion turning to alarm. What are you doing? He moved to the back door, locking it and pocketing the key. Renee's right. You'll just cause a scene. Make it all about you and your feelings, Michael. Stop this right now. I rarely raised my voice, and it seemed to freeze him for a moment. He pulled out his phone, glanced at the screen, then looked back at me with resolve hardening his features. Renee says to hide you somewhere peaceful. We don't need your sad face in the wedding video. The casual cruelty of it stole my breath. I watched in disbelief as my son, my boy, who once cried when he accidentally stepped on a snail, methodically cut me off from the outside world. He unplugged the landline, took my cell phone from the counter, where it was charging. This is insane, I whispered. You can't just lock me in my own home. It's for your own good. He said, not meeting my eyes. You'll thank us later, Michael. Please, this isn't you. This is wrong, and you know it. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Doubt, perhaps, or the last ember of the sun I thought I knew. Then his phone buzzed in his pocket. He checked it, and whatever hesitation he felt vanished. I'll be back Monday after the honeymoon. There's plenty of food in the fridge. He moved toward the front door. Try to understand, Mom. Renee just wants our date to be perfect, Michael. I called after him, my voice breaking, don't do this. But he was already closing the door. I ran to it just as I heard the key turn in the lock from the outside. I pounded on the door, calling his name, begging him to come back, to talk to me. Through the small window beside the door, I saw him walk to his car, where Renee sat waiting, her blonde hair gleaming in the morning sun. As Michael slid into the driver's seat, she turned and looked directly at my window. Even from a distance, I could see her smile, not the practiced, camera-ready one she wore for photos, but something smaller, satisfied she'd won. She'd finally cut me out completely. I stood there long after their car disappeared, my hands pressed against the door, tears sliding silently down my face. The house around me, the home where I'd raised my son, where I'd loved my husband, where I built my life, had become my prison. I don't know how long I stood there, minutes, maybe hours. Time loses meaning when your world collapses. Eventually my legs began to ache, and I moved to Harold's old armchair, my body feeling suddenly twice its age after the initial shock wore off. I tried the doors and windows. Every exit was locked and Michael had taken all the keys. The windows were the old-fashioned kind that didn't open more than a few inches. Even if I could get one fully open, I doubted my 70-year-old knees would allow me to climb out. I thought about the neighbors. The Hendersons to the left were away visiting their daughter. The young couple to the right both worked long hours and barely nodded hello when we passed each other. Screaming for help seemed undignified and futile. I sat on Michael's old bed, picking up a photo from his nightstand, him at 10 years old, gap-toothed and grinning, his arm around me at some school function. I'd been a single mother even then, Harold working overseas for months at a time to provide for us. It had been just Michael and me against the world until Renee. The tears came again, hot and bitter. I allowed myself exactly 5 minutes of crying. Then I wiped my face, straightened my shoulders, and stood up. Self-pity wouldn't open these doors. Then I remembered Harold's old phone. My husband had been notorious for keeping outdated technology after his death. I couldn't bear to throw away his things. His old flip phone was probably still in the dresser drawer where I'd placed it 5 years ago. I hurried to the bedroom, hope rising for the first time. The drawer stuck slightly as I pulled it open, and there it was. Under Harold's handkerchiefs, a silver flip phone. I pressed the power button. Nothing happened. Of course the battery would be dead after all this time. I searched the house and finally found the charger. I plugged it in with shaking hands and waited. A minute passed, 2. Then the screen flickered to life, showing a low battery icon, but, miraculously, 1 bar of signal. I clutched the phone to my chest, relief washing over me. Now I just needed to decide who to call. I needed someone who would believe me without question. Someone who knew me well enough to know I wouldn't make this up. Someone who wouldn't be intimidated by Renee. I scrolled through the old contacts list, and there it was under H for Harriet. Harriet Coleman had been my friend for over 40 years. We taught at the same school, raised our children together, supported each other through Harold's death and her divorce. She was fierce, loyal, and most importantly had never warmed to Renee. There's something cold behind those eyes, she'd whispered to me. At the engagement party, I pressed the call button, praying the phone had enough battery to connect. 1 ring, 2, 3. Hello? Harriet's familiar voice, suspicious of the unknown number. Harriet, I said, my voice breaking with relief. It's Eleanor. I need your help, Eleanor. Whose phone are you calling from? You sound upset. It's Harold's old phone. Listen carefully. I don't know how long the battery will last. I took a deep breath and forced myself to speak clearly. Michael has locked me in my house. He and Renee don't want me at the wedding. They've taken my phone, disconnected the landline, and locked all the exits. I'm trapped. Silence. Then, Eleanor, are you serious? This isn't some kind of joke. I wish it were. He came this morning and I told her everything. The words tumbling out quickly as I kept anxious eyes on the battery indicator. When I finished, Harriet's voice was cold with fury. That little witch has been working on him for months. I knew she was trouble. But this is criminal. I don't know what to do. I admitted the cleaning service might come tomorrow. But you'll do nothing, Harriet interrupted firmly, except stay safe and wait. I'm calling Gloria and Patricia right now. We'll handle this. Gloria Harris was a retired nurse who volunteered at the hospital board. Patricia Washington had been an assistant district attorney before retirement. Both were part of our bridge club. Both were formidable women who wouldn't back down from a fight. What are you going to do? I asked. Nothing illegal, Harriet said, which wasn't exactly reassuring. But that girl picked the wrong mother to mess with, and Michael should know better than to cross the women who've known him since he was in diapers. The phone beeped. Warning of low battery. I have to go, I said quickly. The battery's dying. Sit tight, Eleanor. We're coming for you, and Eleanor, don't worry about the wedding. By the time we're done, Renee will wish she'd sent you an engraved invitation. The line went dead, the phone screen fading to black seconds later. I set it down carefully, a strange mixture of fear and hope swirling inside me. I'd made the call. Now, all I could do was wait. As night fell, I noticed a folder peeking out from under the guest bed. I knelt down and pulled it out. Inside were papers Michael must have forgotten during his last visit. Bank statements, credit card bills, and several printed emails between Michael and Renee. I shouldn't read them, I thought. Then I remembered being locked in my own home and decided privacy concerns had gone out the window along with my freedom. The first email was from Renee, dated 6 months ago. Talked to Mom about the house situation. She agrees it's ridiculous for your mother to rattle around in that big place all alone. After we're married, we need to convince her to downsize to something more appropriate. The market is hot right now. We could get top dollar if we sell quickly. That down payment for the lake house isn't going to appear by magic. My house. They were planning to sell my house, the home I'd owned outright for 20 years. I read another email. This one from just last month. Your mother's latest passive-aggressive gift made Mom furious. A family recipe book. As if I need her outdated cooking tips. This is exactly why we need to limit contact after the wedding. She's trying to stake her claim on you, Michael. You need to show her that I'm your priority now. The passive-aggressive gift had been a collection of Harold's favorite recipes that I thought Michael might want to have. It had taken me weeks to compile. The last email was from Renee just 3 days ago. I've been thinking about the wedding. Your mother's going to make a scene, you know she will. Remember how she sobbed at the engagement party? Everyone was looking at her instead of us. I don't want that at our wedding. Mom agrees it might be better if she doesn't come, we can tell everyone she's ill. Michael's response was short. I don't know, Renee. It seems extreme. Her final message, if you can't do this one thing to protect our special day, I'm worried about what that means for our future. Who comes first, Michael? Your mother or your wife? I sat on the floor. The papers scattered around me, so this was how it happened. This was how my son had been convinced that locking away his mother was an act of love toward his future wife. Night was falling now, the house growing dark around me. I switched on lamps, made myself a sandwich I couldn't eat, and tried to distract myself with a book I couldn't focus on. All the while, Harriet's words echoed in my mind. By the time we're done, Renee will wish she'd sent you an engraved invitation. What did that mean? What were my friends planning? As I finally drifted toward uneasy sleep, one thought circled in my mind. They thought locking me away would silence me. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Of my fury, but of the system that had failed us, at the therapist who planted these ideas, at Michael himself, who should have been strong enough to resist this manipulation. I gathered the papers carefully and returned to the living room. Night was falling now, the house growing dark around me. I switched on lamps, made myself a sandwich I couldn't eat, and tried to distract myself with a book I couldn't focus on. All the while, Harriet's words echoed in my mind. By the time we're done, Renee will wish she'd sent you an engraved invitation. What did that mean? What were my friends planning? The night stretched endlessly before me. I lay in bed fully clothed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle around me. The home that had always been my sanctuary now felt like a mausoleum, a place of echoes and ghosts. Tomorrow was Friday, the rehearsal dinner. Whatever Harriet and the others planned to do, it would have to happen soon. As I finally drifted toward uneasy sleep, one thought circled in my mind. They thought locking me away would silence me. They were about to learn how wrong they were. I woke up Friday morning stiff and rested, having slept fitfully in Harold's chair. The morning light streamed through the curtains I hadn't closed, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. For a moment, I forgot what had happened. Then reality crashed back. I was a prisoner in my own home. My son's wedding was tomorrow, and I'd been deemed too embarrassing to attend. The emails I'd found last night sat in a neat stack on the coffee table. I'd read them over and over until I'd practically memorized them. Each word of Renee's felt like a knife twisting deeper, not just the cruelty, but the calculation behind it. She'd been working on Michael for months, maybe years, systematically turning him against me. I made myself tea and toast, going through the motions of normalcy even though nothing was normal. The house felt different now, claustrophobic, its familiar corner suddenly sinister. I'd lived here for 35 years, raised Michael here, grieved for Harold here. Now it was my cage. As I washed my breakfast dishes, I heard a car pull into the driveway. My heart leapt at Harriet. Come already? I rushed to the window, but it wasn't Harriet's sensible sedan. It was a sleek black SUV I'd never seen before. A woman stepped out, elegant in a cream pantsuit, her silver-streaked dark hair pulled back in a smooth chignon. She checked a piece of paper, then walked confidently to my front door. The doorbell rang, its chime echoing through the silent house. I hesitated. Should I answer? What if this was some friend of Renee's, sent to check on me? But curiosity won out. I approached the door, keeping to the side so I wouldn't be visible through the small window. Hello? The woman called, her voice clear and professional. Mrs. Johnson, my name is Patricia Washington. Harriet Coleman sent me. Patricia, Harriet's friend, the former assistant district attorney. Relief flooded through me as I moved to the door. I'm here, I called through the wood. But I'm locked in. Michael took all the keys. Patricia's voice hardened. I was afraid of that. Stand back from the door, please. I stepped back, wondering what she planned to do. Break it down. Call a locksmith, Eleanor. She called. Is there a spare key hidden anywhere outside, under a flower pot? Perhaps, I thought for a moment. There's one in the fake rock by the rose bushes. Harold always worried about getting locked out. A few minutes passed. I heard footsteps around the side of the house, then returning to the front. The lock turned and Patricia Washington stood in my doorway, key in hand. Found it, she said, pocketing the key. Though I must say, a fake rock isn't the most secure hiding place. Security hasn't been my biggest concern until now, I replied, feeling tears of relief threatening. A friendly face after 24 hours of solitude was almost overwhelming. Patricia stepped inside, closing the door behind her up close. I could see the intelligence in her dark eyes, the firm set of her mouth. She looked exactly like what she was, a woman who had faced down hardened criminals in court and won. Harriet told me what happened, she said, her voice gentle but controlled. I have to say, in my 30 years of practicing law, I've seen some deplorable family situations. But this, she shook her head. This is a new low. Thank you for coming, I said, leading her to the living room. I wasn't sure what Harriet meant when she said you'd handle it. Patricia set her leather briefcase on the coffee table. Well, first things first. What Michael did is criminal false imprisonment at the very least. We could call the police right now and have him arrested. The thought of Michael in handcuffs made my stomach turn. Despite everything, he was still my son. I don't know if I want that, Patricia nodded. Unsurprised, most mothers don't. But we need to understand what we're dealing with. She gestured to the stack of emails. Harriet mentioned you found something. I handed her the papers. These were in a folder under the guest bed. Emails between Michael and Renee. They've been planning to sell my house. And Renee has been, I couldn't finish, manipulating him, Patricia finished. Already scanning the emails with a practiced eye. Her expression darkened as she read. This is textbook isolation. Cut off the person from their support system. Convince them their loved ones are toxic. Then move in for whatever they're really after. She tapped the email about selling my house. In this case, it seems pretty clear what that is, my home, I whispered. And whatever equity you have in it, Patricia added grimly. Plus getting you out of the picture so she can have complete control over Michael. She pulled out her phone and took photos of each email. Evidence, she explained. Just in case of what? Patricia gave me a measured look. In case we need to take legal action, or in case he's mysteriously disappear. She finished photographing and handed the papers back to me. Now, Eleanor, I need to ask you a serious question. What do you want out of this situation? I blinked, surprised. No one had asked me that yet. I want my son back. I want him to see what Renee is doing to him, to us, and the wedding. It's tomorrow, I sighed. Conflict twisting in my chest. I don't want to ruin his wedding, even after this. He's still my son. But I can't just pretend. This didn't happen, Patricia nodded, pulling out a yellow legal pad. Here's what we know. Renee has been systematically alienating Michael from you. She's got her sights set on your house. And she was willing to have you falsely imprisoned to keep you away from the wedding. She looked up at me, pen poised. What we need now is a plan. Just then, the doorbell rang again. Through the window, I saw Harriet's car in the driveway, with Gloria Harris's station wagon behind it. Patricia opened the door, and my friend swept in like a small army. Harriet, tall and angular with her trademark red-framed glasses, embraced me immediately. Eleanor. My God, when you called, I could hardly believe it. Are you all right? Before I could answer, Gloria hugged me too. She smelled of antiseptic and a lavender perfume she'd worn for decades. We came as soon as we could coordinate. Patricia had court this morning. I led them to the living room, feeling strangely like I was hosting a normal coffee clutch instead of a war council. Harriet pulled a thermos from her bag. I brought real coffee. None of that instant stuff you drink. She poured cups for everyone. Now, what's this I hear about emails? Patricia summarized what I'd found, passing her phone around so they could see the photos. Gloria's expression grew thunderous. This is elder abuse, she declared, psychological manipulation. False imprisonment. I've seen cases like this at the hospital. Usually it's about money or property. It is, I said quietly. They want my house. Harriet snorted. Of course they do. That little gold digger has expensive taste. Have you seen her engagement ring? Could blind someone with that rock. The question is, Patricia interjected, steering us back on track. What do we do about tomorrow? The wedding is at St. Mark's at 3 o'clock, followed by a reception at the lakeside. We could call the police, Gloria suggested. Have Michael arrested at the altar. That would be poetic justice. I shook my head firmly. No. I don't want to humiliate him publicly. He had no problem humiliating you, Harriet pointed out. Two wrongs don't make a right, I said. And he's still my son. Renee is the one who's been poisoning him against me. Patricia tapped her pen against her legal pad thoughtfully. What about Renee's parents? What do we know about them? I thought for a moment. They're very proper. Old money. Her father is a retired judge, very concerned with appearances. All three women exchanged looks. A retired judge, Patricia repeated, a slow smile spreading across her face, who would presumably be horrified to learn his daughter had committed a felony days before the wedding, especially if it involved locking away the mother of the groom, Gloria added. Judge Robert Henderson, I supplied. I met him at the engagement party. Very formal, very proper. Patricia wrote the name down. I know Bob Henderson. Served on the bench for 30 years. Strict constructionist. Big on family values. He'd be mortified by this. Harriet leaned forward eagerly. So, what's the plan? We go to the judge with evidence his precious daughter is a manipulative criminal? Not quite so dramatic, Patricia cautioned, but perhaps a discreet word before the ceremony. She turned to me. Eleanor, would you be comfortable confronting Renee's parents with this information? I thought about facing Judge Henderson and his equally formidable wife, showing them evidence of their daughter's manipulation. My stomach nodded. I'm not sure I could do that without breaking down. You don't have to, Harriet said firmly. That's what friends are. Gloria nodded. We can present the evidence. Patricia has the legal background to make it clear how serious this is. Patricia was writing rapidly on her pad. We'll need a multi-pronged approach. First, someone needs to get Eleanor to the church tomorrow. I suggest, Gloria, your car is less recognizable than Harriet's red convertible. Gloria nodded. I can pick you up at 2. We'll enter through the side door. I know the custodian. Meanwhile, Patricia continued. I'll arrive early and request a private word with Judge Henderson and his wife. I'll show them the evidence and explain the legal implications. They won't want a scandal, especially one involving criminal charges, and I'll run interference with the wedding party. Harriet added, I can keep an eye on Renee. Make sure she doesn't catch wind of what's happening until it's too late. I looked at my 3 friends, these formidable women who had rallied to my defense. You thought of everything. Not quite, Patricia said. We still need to decide what happens when Michael sees you at the church. He'll know you escaped somehow. A heavy silence fell over the room. This was the part I'd been avoiding thinking about. Would Michael cause a scene? Try to remove me again, pretend nothing had happened. I need to speak with him before the ceremony, I said finally. Alone, not to confront him, but to let him know I've seen the emails, that I know what Renee has been doing. That's risky, Gloria warned. He might react badly. He's my son, I said simply. I have to try. Patricia made a note. We'll create an opportunity for you to speak privately with Michael before the ceremony. The rest will depend on how he responds. Harriet refilled our coffee cups. There's one more thing we need to address. The house. She looked at me directly. Even if tomorrow goes perfectly, and Michael sees the light, Renee won't give up easily. We need to protect your property. Patricia nodded. I took the liberty of drafting some paperwork. She pulled a folder from her briefcase. A revocable living trust. It would put your house and other assets into a protected trust that can't be sold or transferred without your explicit consent. Even if someone obtained power of attorney over you. I stared at the documents, stunned by my friend's thoroughness. You prepared all this since last night? I may have cancelled a few appointments this morning, Patricia said with a small smile. This seemed more important. The trust would name the 3 of us as trustees, Gloria explained. So, even if something happened to you, we would ensure your wishes were carried out. I felt tears welling in my eyes again. I don't know how to thank you all. Harriet squeezed my hand. You do the same for any of us. That's what friendship is for the next hour. We finalized our plan, covering every contingency we could think of. Patricia had me sign the trust documents, which she promised to file immediately. Gloria called her contact at the church to ensure we could enter discreetly. Harriet made a list of wedding guests, who might be allies if things got complicated as they prepared to leave. Harriet handed me a small box. A burner phone, she explained, untraceable. I've programmed all our numbers into it. Keep it with you at all times. Gloria gave me a hug. Try to rest, tomorrow will be challenging. But we'll be right beside you. Patricia was the last to leave at the door. She turned to me with a serious expression. Eleanor, are you absolutely certain you want to go through with this? It would be simpler to press charges and let the legal system handle it. I shook my head. This isn't about punishing Michael, or even Renee. It's about truth, about making sure my son sees what's happening before he makes a terrible mistake. Patricia nodded. I understand, but remember, if at any point you feel unsafe or overwhelmed tomorrow, just say the word and we'll shift to plan B. What's plan B? I asked. I call my friends at the district attorney's office, she said grimly. And we let justice take its course. After they left, I stood in my living room, no longer a prisoner but still feeling far from free. Tomorrow I would face my son, his manipulative fiancée, and her powerful parents. The thought should have terrified me. But instead, I felt a curious calm. They had tried to silence me, to hide me away like a shameful secret. But they have forgotten one crucial thing. I wasn't alone. I had friends, fierce, loyal friends who wouldn't let me be erased. I picked up the photo of Michael that I had been looking at yesterday. 10-year-old Michael with his gap-toothed smile and trusting eyes, somewhere inside the man who had locked me away. That boy still existed. I had to believe that. I'm coming for you, I whispered to the photo. Not to punish you, to save you, tomorrow. They would all learn what happens when you underestimate a mother's love and her determination to be heard. I barely slept that night. The house creaked and settled around me, each sound magnified in the darkness. I kept thinking about Michael, not the man who had locked me in my home, but the boy who once crawled into my bed during thunderstorms, who made me handmade Mother's Day cards, long after his classmates had switched to store-bought gifts. How had we come to this? Saturday morning dawned bright and clear, a perfect day for a wedding. I stood at my bedroom window, watching sunlight filter through the oak trees, wondering how many other mothers had woken up on their sons' wedding days, feeling this mixture of dread and determination. The burner phone Harriet had given me sat on my nightstand. I picked it up, checked that it was charged. This small device represented my lifeline, my connection to the only people who could help me navigate the day ahead. I showered and dressed carefully, not in the navy dress I'd originally planned, but in a simple gray suit with pearl buttons. Dignified but understated. I didn't want to stand out or cause a scene. I just wanted to be present, to be seen. At noon, the phone buzzed with a text from Gloria. Everything said, pick you up at 1:30. Patricia meeting Judge H at 2. I replied with a simple ready, then went to the kitchen to make tea. My hands shook slightly as I filled the kettle, not from fear, but from a strange, electric anticipation. After months of feeling powerless against Renee's machinations, I was finally taking action. As I sipped my tea, I thought about what I would say to Michael when I saw him. Not accusations or recriminations, those would only push him further into Renee's arms. I needed to be calm, to show him the evidence without emotion clouding the message, to remind him, gently but firmly, of who he was before Renee. The hours crawled by. I tried to distract myself by reading, but the words blurred on the page. I rearranged the items in my purse 3 times: wallet, tissues, mints, the folded copies of the emails that might save my son from a terrible mistake. At 1:25, my phone buzzed again. Gloria, texting that she was 5 minutes away. I took one final look in the mirror, straightened my jacket, and picked up my small gift for Michael. A pair of cufflinks that had belonged to his father, wrapped in silver paper with a simple card that read, "Love, Mom." Gloria's station wagon pulled into the driveway exactly on time. She was wearing a floral dress, her gray hair neatly pinned up, looking for all the world like a typical wedding guest rather than a woman on a mission. "Ready?" she asked, as I slid into the passenger seat. "As I'll ever be," I replied, clutching my purse with its damning evidence. Gloria squeezed my hand briefly before putting the car in reverse. "Patricia is already at the church. Harriet will meet us there." She glanced at me. "Remember, if at any point you feel uncomfortable." "I know," I interrupted gently, "but I need to see this through." The drive to St. Mark's took 15 minutes. Neither of us spoke much, the weight of what lay ahead filling the car. As we approached the church, I could see cars already filling the parking lot, early arrivals for the 3 o'clock ceremony. "We'll go in through the side entrance," Gloria reminded me as she parked on a quiet side street half a block away. "Less chance of running into the wedding party before we're ready." We walked briskly to the church, autumn leaves crunching beneath our feet. The side door was propped open slightly. Gloria's custodian friend had come through for us. We slipped inside, finding ourselves in a narrow hallway that led to the church offices. "Patricia should be in the small conference room with Judge Henderson by now," Gloria whispered, checking her watch. Harriet texted that the bridal party is in the main dressing room. "Michael is in Pastor Williams' office with the best man." My heart thumped painfully at the mention of Michael. He was just down the hall, perhaps unaware that his carefully orchestrated plan had failed. That his mother was about to disrupt the narrative Renee had constructed. "There you are," Harriet's voice, kept low but urgent, came from behind us. She hurried down the hallway, elegant in a blue dress, her red glasses perched on her nose. "Patricia's with the judge, and his wife now. It's goin' interestingly." "What does that mean?" I asked. Harriet made a face. "The judge is livid, but not necessarily in the way we hoped. He seems more angry about the potential scandal than his daughter's behavior. Mrs. Henderson is another story. She looked physically ill when Patricia showed her the emails." "And Renee?" Gloria asked, still getting ready. "She has no idea what's happening." Harriet checked her watch. "Patricia said to give her 10 more minutes with the Hendersons, then bring Eleanor to Pastor Williams' office. She's arranged for the best man to be called away so you can speak with Michael alone." 10 minutes. 10 minutes until I faced my son. My mouth went dry, and I found myself gripping Gloria's arm for support. "I need to use the restroom," I said suddenly. Harriet pointed down the hall. "Second door on the left." But her timing is everything. In the small bathroom. I splashed cold water on my face, careful not to disturb my makeup. I stared at my reflection, at the lines etched around my eyes and mouth, the silver threading through my dark hair. I looked older than I had just days ago, as if Michael's betrayal had accelerated time itself. "You can do this," I told my reflection. "For Michael. For yourself." When I emerged, Gloria and Harriet were huddled in conversation with Patricia, who must have just left the Hendersons. Patricia looked immaculate as always, but there was tension around her eyes. "Eleanor," she said when she saw me, "the Hendersons are aware of the situation. Judge Henderson has asked to speak with Michael immediately, but I suggested it might be better if you spoke with him first." "How did they take it?" I asked. Patricia's expression was carefully neutral. "Judge Henderson is concerned about the legal implications. Mrs. Henderson is distraught. They've asked Renee to join them as soon as you've had a chance to speak with Michael." "So they believe me?" "The evidence convinced them. The emails speak for themselves," Patricia said. "And when I mentioned the potential criminal charges, the judge became very cooperative. He's a proud man. The idea of his daughter being arrested at her own wedding was enough to get his full attention." Harriet glanced at her phone. "It's time. The best man has been called away to deal with a floral emergency that I may have fabricated. Michael is alone in Pastor Williams' office." My heart raced as the 4 of us moved down the hallway outside the pastor's office. "My friend stopped. We'll be right out here," Gloria assured me, squeezing my hand. "Remember," Patricia added, "stay calm, stick to the facts, and call us if you need backup." I nodded, took a deep breath, and knocked on the door. "Come in," Michael's voice called. I pushed open the door. Michael stood by the window, adjusting his tie, his back to me. He wore a black tuxedo. That made him look so much like his father it made my heart ache. "Did you find the boutonniere?" he began, turning. His words died as he saw me standing in the doorway. The color drained from his face. "Mom, how did you—" "Hello, Michael," I said, closing the door behind me. My voice was steadier than I'd expected. "We need to talk." He stared at me like I was a ghost. "You're supposed to be, I thought you were locked in my house." I finished for him. "I was, until yesterday, when my friends helped me." Michael ran a hand through his hair, his eyes darting to the door as if calculating an escape. "Mom, I can explain. Renee and I thought—" "I know what you thought," I interrupted, my calm finally starting to crack. "That I'm old and confused, that I'd make a scene at your wedding, that I'm an embarrassment to be hidden away." "That's not," he began, but I held up a hand. "Please, let me finish." I opened my purse and pulled out the folded emails. "I found these in the guest room after you locked me in. Emails between you and Renee." His face went from pale to ashen. "You went through my things? You imprisoned me in my own home," I countered, my voice rising slightly before I got it under control. "I think that gives me some latitude." I unfolded the papers and held them out. "These show a pattern, Michael. Renee systematically turning you against me, planning to sell my house out from under me, calling my love for you unhealthy and emotional incest." He didn't take the papers, but his eyes flicked to them, recognition dawning in his expression. "That's private," he said weakly. "So was my freedom," I replied. "Michael, look at me. Really look at me. I'm your mother. I've loved you every day of your life. I would never try to control you or come between you and someone who truly loved you. But Renee doesn't love you. She loves what she can get through you." Michael's jaw tightened. "You don't know her like I do. I know what she wrote in these emails. I know she convinced you to lock up your own mother." I stepped closer, keeping my voice gentle. The Michael I raised would never have done that, not without being manipulated by someone who doesn't have his best interests at heart. Something flickered in his eyes, doubt, perhaps, or the first crack in the wall Renee had built between us. "She said you tried to ruin the wedding. he muttered, that you'd make it all about you, and yet here I am, speaking to you privately, not causing a scene. I set the emails on the desk between us. Read them, Michael. Read them as if they were written about someone else's mother. What would you think of a woman who wrote these things? Who plotted to sell an elderly woman's home? Who used terms like emotional incest to describe a mother's love? His hands shook slightly as he picked out the papers. I watched his face as he skimmed the emails he'd seen before, but perhaps never truly read. I saw confusion, then disbelief, then the dawning of a terrible realization. Mom, he said, his voice barely audible. I never meant. A sharp knock interrupted whatever he was about to say. The door opened and Judge Henderson stood there, his face a mask of controlled fury. Michael, he said, his voice clipped. A word, please, now? Judge Henderson stood in the doorway, his imposing figure blocking the exit, though retired. He still carried himself with the authority of the bench, shoulders squared, chin raised, eyes that seemed to render judgment with a single glance. Judge Henderson, Michael said, quickly setting down the emails. This isn't what it looks, save it. The judge interrupted, stepping into the room and closing the door firmly behind him. His gaze swept over me, not unkindly but with assessment. Mrs. Johnson, my wife and I owe you an apology. Had we known what our daughter was planning. Michael looked between us, confusion etched on his face. You've spoken to Renee's parents? My friend Patricia Washington, the former assistant, thought they should know that their daughter manipulated you into committing a felony, I said quietly. Judge Henderson's jaw tightened. False imprisonment, elder abuse, conspiracy. Do you have any idea, young man, what kind of charges you could be facing? Michael paled. Sir, I never meant. Intent is relevant in sentencing, not in determining guilt. The judge cut in. What matters is that you locked your mother in her home against her will. I stepped forward. No one is pressing charges, Judge Henderson. That's not why I'm here. Perhaps you should. He replied grimly. My daughter has clearly crossed a line I never imagined she would approach. He turned to Michael. I've always considered myself a good judge of character. It's necessary in my profession. But I failed to see what was right in front of me, that my daughter has become someone I don't recognize. Michael looked stricken. Judge Henderson, please. I love Renee. We can work this out. The judge's expression softened slightly. Son, love doesn't manipulate. It doesn't isolate. And it certainly doesn't imprison family members who get in the way. He gestured to the emails on the desk. I've seen the evidence. Patricia showed my wife and me copies. Renee's plans for your mother's home. Her systematic campaign to turn you against the woman who raised you. Michael's shoulders slumped. He looked suddenly younger, vulnerable. Like the boy who'd come to me after failing his driver's test the first time, seeking comfort and reassurance. I didn't know, he whispered, about the house, about any of it. She just said Mom was unstable, that she'd make a scene at the wedding. He looked at me, real anguish in his eyes. I thought I was protecting both of you. I wanted to go to him, to wrap my arms around him as I had when he was small. But I held back. This moment required clarity, not emotion. Michael, I said gently, you locked me in my house for 3 days. You took my phone, disconnected my landline. You left me with no way to call for help if something had happened. What if there had been a fire? A medical emergency? The reality of what he'd done seemed to hit him fully for the first time. He sank into a chair, head in his hands. Oh God. Mom, I'm so sorry. I didn't think. No. You didn't, Judge Henderson said, but without heat now. You allowed someone else to do your thinking for you. He checked his watch. We have less than an hour before guests start arriving. We need to resolve this situation quickly and discreetly. A soft knock at the door interrupted us. Mrs. Henderson entered, her elegant figure tense with distress. Behind her came Patricia, looking grimly satisfied, and a stone-faced Pastor Williams. Where is Renee? The judge asked his wife. Still in the bride's room, Mrs. Henderson replied. She doesn't know anything yet. I told her I needed to check on the flower arrangements. Her eyes found mine. Mrs. Johnson, I cannot express how mortified I am. We raised our daughter to respect her elders, to value family. Where you failed, Patricia interjected coolly, wasn't teaching her not to commit felonies. Pastor Williams cleared his throat. I've known the Henderson family for 20 years. And you, Michael, since you were a boy. This situation is unprecedented in my ministry. The wedding cannot proceed, Judge Henderson stated flatly. Michael's head snapped up. What? We can't just cancel. There are 200 people coming. Renee's family from out of town. Would you prefer we continue with the ceremony and have you arrested at the reception? Patricia asked it. Because those are your options, Michael, this wedding, or criminal charges. No one is getting arrested, I said firmly. All eyes turned to me. That's not what I want. What do you want, Eleanor? Patricia asked, her voice softening. I looked at my son, my confused, manipulated, but still fundamentally good son. I want Michael to see the truth, to understand what Renee has been doing. And then I want him to make his own decision. Judge Henderson frowned with all due respect. Mrs. Johnson, my daughter manipulated your son into committing a crime against you. This isn't a simple misunderstanding. I understand that, I replied. But I also understand that Michael loves her, or thinks he does. If we cancel this wedding by force, he may never see her for who she really is. He'll always wonder, always defend her in his mind. Michael was watching me, a mixture of shame and gratitude in his eyes. What are you suggesting? Mrs. Henderson asked. I took a deep breath. I think Michael needs to confront Renee. With all of us present, with the evidence in front of her, let him hear from her own lips what she thinks of me, of him, of this marriage. Pastor Williams nodded slowly. A moment of truth before God. There is biblical precedent for this. It won't work, Judge Henderson objected. Renee will deny everything, twist the situation, manipulate Michael as she's been doing all along. She might try, Patricia said thoughtfully, but with all of us as witnesses? With the emails in front of her? It would be difficult. A tense silence fell over the room. Then Michael stood up, straightening his shoulders. I need to talk to Renee, he said. His voice was steady now, resolved. Mom's right. I need to hear from her directly. Judge Henderson studied his future son-in-law for a long moment, then nodded curtly. Very well, Martha. Please ask Renee to join us. Tell her it's urgent, Mrs. Henderson slipped out of the room. The rest of us waited in uncomfortable silence. I moved to stand beside Michael, placing a gentle hand on his arm. He didn't pull away. Whatever happens, I whispered, I love you. That hasn't changed. He covered my hand with his, a small gesture that meant everything. I know. Mom, I'm so sorry. The door opened again, and Mrs. Henderson returned with Renee. My breath caught at the sight of her. She was already in her wedding dress, a magnificent creation of lace and silk that must have cost a fortune. Her blonde hair was arranged in an elaborate updo, tiny diamonds glittering among the curls. She looked like a princess from a fairy tale. Until she saw me. Her eyes widened, then narrowed, her perfect features contorting with shock and rage before she quickly composed herself. What is she doing here? Renee asked, her voice falsely sweet. Michael, darling, I thought we agreed your mother wasn't well enough to attend. Cut the act. Renee, Judge Henderson said sharply, we know what you did. What you convinced Michael to do. Renee blinked innocently. Daddy, what are you talking about? Michael and I were concerned about Eleanor's health. That's all. The excitement of the wedding might have been too much for her. So you had Michael lock her in her house, Mrs. Henderson asked, her voice trembling with anger. Take her phone. Leave her with no way to call for help. That's ridiculous, Renee scoffed. Michael would never do something like that. Would you? Honey, she turned to Michael, reaching for his hand. He stepped back. Out of her reach, they know. Renee, they've seen the emails. Something flashed in her eyes, calculation, then fear. Quickly masked. What emails? Michael picked up the papers from the desk and held them out. These. About selling Mom's house. About cutting her out of our lives. About, his voice broke slightly. About using me to get what you want. Renee didn't take the papers. She looked around the room, assessing the situation, the potential allies and enemies. Finding none of the former, she switched tactics. Michael, baby, you're upset, I understand. But we can talk about this after the wedding. Our guests will be arriving any minute. We can't keep them waiting. Answer the question. Renee? Judge Henderson demanded. Did you or did you not convince Michael to confine his mother against her will? Renee's perfect facade began to crack. She was going to ruin everything. You didn't see her at the engagement party, crying, making everything about her. She's been manipulating Michael for years, using guilt to keep him tied to her apron strings. That's not true, Michael said quietly. Mom has never tried to control me. She supported me through college, through my first job, through every relationship before you. Of course she did, Renee snapped, because none of those women were a threat. They were all too weak to take you away from her. I watched the cruel words hit my son like physical blows. This was the real Renee. The one I'd glimpsed behind her smiles and her flattery. The one who saw people as obstacles or tools, never as human beings with feelings and dignity. In my house, I asked, speaking directly to Renee for the first time, were you planning to sell it out from under me? She raised her chin defiantly. It's ridiculous for one old woman to rattle around in a 4-bedroom house. You don't need it, we do. It's my home, I said simply, the home where I raised my son, where I nursed my husband until he died. It's not yours to take. It would have been. Once we were married. Her gaze shifted to Michael, calculating again. It still can be Michael. This is just pre-wedding jitters. Everyone's overreacting. We can sort this out after the honeymoon. Michael stared at her, as if seeing her clearly for the first time. You really don't care, do you? About what you did to my mother? About using me? About any of it? Renee's face hardened. What I care about is standing in this room in a $12,000 wedding dress while our guests are arriving. What I care about is not becoming the laughingstock of everyone we know because your mother couldn't handle not being the center of attention for one day. Judge Henderson stepped forward. That's enough, Renee. This wedding is not happening today. Not after what we've learned, Daddy. Renee's voice rose to a shriek. You can't do this to me. Do you have any idea how this will look? What people will say? I'm more concerned with what would happen if this marriage proceeded. Her father replied coldly. You've demonstrated a disturbing lack of empathy and ethics, not to mention potentially criminal behavior. Renee turned to Michael. Desperation replacing calculation. Michael, please. Don't let them do this to us. To our special day. I love you. Michael looked at her for a long moment, then he removed the boutonniere from his lapel and placed it carefully on the desk. No. Renee, he said quietly, you don't. Love doesn't lock people away. Love doesn't scheme to take someone's home. Love doesn't manipulate. He glanced at me, then back to her. I think we're done. The color drained from Renee's face. You can't mean that after everything I've done to make this wedding perfect. After everything we've planned, I mean it, Michael said, his voice stronger now. The wedding is off. For a moment, the room was utterly silent. Renee stared at Michael. Her perfect makeup, unable to hide the ugly shock distorting her features. Then she turned to me, hatred blazing in her eyes. This is your fault, she hissed. You couldn't stand to see him happy, could you? You had to ruin everything. Renee, her mother said sharply. That's enough. No, it's not nearly enough. Renee's voice rose dangerously. Do you have any idea what people will say? The humiliation? 200 guests are about to arrive for a wedding that isn't happening because his pathetic mother couldn't handle being left out. Judge Henderson gripped his daughter's arm. Lower your voice, now. You've done quite enough damage. What about the damage to my reputation? Renee wrenched her arm away. My friends, my colleagues, everyone will be talking about this for years. Perhaps you should have considered that before you had your fiancé imprison his mother, Patricia observed dryly. Renee whirled on her. Who even are you? This is a family matter. She's my friend, I said quietly. One of several who helped me when my own son locked me away. Michael flinched at my words, raw pain flashing across his face. Mom, not now, Judge Henderson interrupted. We have a more immediate problem. Guests will begin arriving in, he checked his watch, approximately 20 minutes. We need to inform them that the ceremony is cancelled. Pastor Williams nodded. I'll have the ushers redirect people as they arrive, but we should prepare a statement explaining the cancellation. What will we tell them, Mrs. Henderson asked, her composure finally cracking. That our daughter manipulated her fiancé into committing a crime? That she planned to steal her mother-in-law's home? We'll simply say the wedding has been cancelled due to unforeseen circumstances, the pastor replied gently. Details aren't necessary at this point. Renee let out a strangled laugh. Unforeseen circumstances? That's how we're describing this ambush. Would you prefer we tell the truth? Her father asked coldly. Because I assure you, that option would be far more damaging to your precious reputation. Something shifted in Renee's eyes, calculation replacing anger. She smoothed her hands over her wedding dress, visibly collecting herself. Fine, she said, her voice suddenly controlled. Cancel the wedding. But this isn't over. She turned to Michael. When you come to your senses and realize what you've thrown away, don't expect me to be waiting. Then she swept from the room, her elaborate train trailing behind her like a vengeful cloud. Mrs. Henderson looked at us apologetically. I should go with her. Make sure she doesn't do anything rash. She hurried after her daughter, closing the door softly behind her. The tension in the room ebbed slightly with Renee's departure. Michael sank back into his chair, looking shell-shocked. Judge Henderson ran a hand over his face, suddenly appearing every one of his 70-plus years. I owe you an apology, Mrs. Johnson, he said formally. Had I known what my daughter was planning, you couldn't have known, I assured him. Renee was very careful to keep her true intentions hid. And the judge shook his head. A father should know his child better. He turned to Michael. Son, I'm sorry this fell apart on your wedding day, but better now than after vows were exchanged. Michael nodded numbly. I just can't believe all this time she was using me. Patricia checked her watch. I hate to be practical at a moment like this, but we need to inform the guests, and there's the matter of the reception venue, the caterers, the band. I'll take care of it, Judge Henderson said firmly. It's the least I can do. Pastor Williams, if you'd assist me in drafting a brief statement. The pastor nodded. and the two men stepped out into the hallway, heads bent in conversation. Patricia squeezed my shoulder. I'll go find Harriet and Gloria. Let them know what's happened. Will you be all right? I nodded. My eyes on Michael's slumped figure. We'll be fine. When the door closed behind Patricia, leaving Michael and me alone. The silence grew heavy between us. There was so much to say, so many hurts to address, I hardly knew where to begin. I'm so sorry. Mom, Michael finally whispered, his voice cracking. I don't even know how to begin to make this right. I moved to sit beside him. Close but not touching. Why, Michael? That's what I keep asking myself. Why would you believe such terrible things about me? He shook his head, unable to meet my eyes. She started so subtly. Little comments about how you seemed sad when we visited. How you always turned the conversation to Dad, to the past. Then it was how you looked at her critically, she said. How you were trying to undermine her. I never. I know that now, he interrupted. But she was convincing. And I wanted her to be happy, to feel secure with me. He finally looked up, his eyes red-rimmed, when she suggested you shouldn't come to the wedding. I resisted at first. But she kept pushing, saying you'd make a scene. Make it all about your grief rather than our joy. And locking me in my home? How did she convince you that was acceptable? Michael's face crumpled with shame. She didn't suggest that specifically. She just kept saying we needed to make sure you couldn't show up. That you weren't well. That you might hurt yourself or embarrass everyone. It was my idea too. He couldn't finish. To imprison me, I supplied quietly. He nodded miserably. I told myself it was just for a few days. That you had everything you needed. That it was for your own good. A tear slipped down his cheek. God, Mom. How could I have done that to you? What kind of son does that make me? I thought carefully before answering. There was a part of me that wanted to comfort him, to say it was all Renee's fault. That he was just manipulated. But that wouldn't be the whole truth. It makes you human, Michael. Fallible. Someone who made a terrible mistake. I took his hand, feeling the familiar shape of it larger now. Then when he was a boy, but still recognizably my son's hand. But it also makes you someone who has to earn back trust. Who has to make amends? He nodded, squeezing my hand. I will. I promise. Whatever it takes. It won't happen overnight. I cautioned, when someone you love betrays you that deeply, it leaves scars. I understand. He looked at me with Harold's eyes. Sincere and pained. I'll spend as long as it takes making this right. Starting with facing everyone out there and taking responsibility for canceling the wedding. A knock at the door interrupted us. Pastor Williams poked his head in. Michael, Judge Henderson could use your help. The first guests have arrived. Michael stood, straightening his tie. I'm coming. He turned back to me. Mom, will you stay? I know it's a lot to ask, but I don't think I can face everyone alone despite everything. My heart ached for him. He looked so young suddenly. So vulnerable. Of course I'll stay. That's what mothers do. As we walked out together, I spotted Harriet, Gloria, and Patricia waiting in the hallway. Their faces showed a mixture of concern and triumph. Everything all right? Harriet asked, eyeing Michael warily. Getting there. I replied. Michael has to help with the guests. The wedding is officially canceled. Gloria squeezed my arm. We're staying. Of course, you shouldn't have to face this crowd alone. Thank you, I said, meaning it from the depths of my soul. I don't know what I would have done without you all. As Michael walked ahead with Pastor Williams, Patricia fell into step beside me. Are you sure about this? Eleanor, standing by him after what he did. I watched my son straight back. His determined stride. He's my son, Patricia. He made a terrible mistake. But he's still my son. That's very forgiving of you, she observed. Not entirely approvingly. I shook my head. Not forgiveness, not yet. That will take time. This is maternal duty. Standing by your child even when they've hurt you, while still holding them accountable. Ahead of us, Michael paused at the church entrance, visibly steeling himself to face the arriving guests. To explain the inexplicable, Judge Henderson stood beside him, a steadying hand on his shoulder. Besides, I added quietly, he's just lost everything he thought he wanted, his fiancée, his future, his certainty. He's going to need his mother now more than ever. We stepped into the church vestibule, where confused guests were beginning to gather. Michael caught my eye across the room and straightened his shoulders, drawing strength from my presence. Whatever came next, the uncomfortable explanations, the gossip, the long road to rebuilding trust, we would face it together, not as we once were, perhaps, but as who we needed to become. 3 months after the wedding that never was, I sat on my back porch watching the winter sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. A light snow had fallen earlier, dusting my garden beds with white. In my hands, a steaming cup of Earl Grey warmed my fingers against the December chill. So much had changed since that Saturday, in September, when my friends had helped me reclaim my voice, my freedom. And my son, the aftermath had been difficult. Of course, there were explanations to be made, rumors to be endured. Michael had taken full responsibility, telling close friends and family the truth, not all of it, but enough. That he had made a terrible mistake, that he had hurt me deeply, that the wedding had been cancelled because he realized he was marrying someone who didn't share his values. Renee had left town within a week, moving back to her parents' vacation home in Florida. From what I'd heard through Harriet's extensive network of friends, she was already dating a wealthy real estate developer. Apparently unfazed by her narrow escape from criminal charges, Judge Henderson had called me once. About a month after the cancelled wedding, he was formal but genuine in his apology, explaining that he and Mrs. Henderson were still processing how they had raised a daughter capable of such manipulation. I didn't have answers for him. Some things defy explanation. The house around me, still my house, secure in the trust Patricia had created, felt different now. Not because anything had changed physically, but because I had changed. I no longer saw it as just the place where I'd raised my family, preserved my memories. Now it was also the place where I'd found my strength, where I learned that even at 70, I wasn't finished growing. The sound of a car door closing in my driveway pulled me from my thoughts. Moments later, Michael appeared around the side of the house, carrying a grocery bag. "Hey, Mom," he called, climbing the porch steps. "Sorry I'm a bit late." The store was packed every Thursday. For the past 3 months, Michael had come for dinner. It was part of our new routine, our careful rebuilding. The first few dinners had been strained, neither of us quite sure how to navigate the shattered trust between us. But slowly, week by week, we were finding our way back to each other. "No problem," I said, rising to help him with the bag. I was just enjoying the sunset inside. Michael moved around my kitchen with familiar ease, unpacking the ingredients. He brought chicken, vegetables, a bottle of wine. He'd taken cooking classes in the past year, a detail I'd somehow missed during the Renee era. "How was your week?" he asked, washing his hands at the sink. "Good. Busy, actually. The women's group at the senior center is planning a fundraiser. I'm on the committee." Michael smiled. "That's great, Mom. I'm glad you're getting involved there. It had been Gloria's idea for me to join the senior center's activities. You've been isolated too long," she'd said. "Time to expand your world." She'd been right. The center had become a second home, a place where I'd made new friends, discovered new interests. I was even teaching a memoir writing class on Mondays. As Michael chopped vegetables, I set the table for 2 placemats, cloth napkins, the good glasses, small rituals of normalcy that helped bridge the gap between what was and what could be. "I saw Dr. Levine yesterday," Michael said casually, not looking up from his chopping. Dr. Levine was his therapist, another part of our rebuilding. Michael's commitment to understand how he had been manipulated, and more importantly, why he had been vulnerable to that manipulation. "How did it go?" I asked, folding a napkin. "Good, hard, but good." He scraped the vegetables into a bowl. "We talked about boundaries, how I never really established any with Renee, how I confused love with submission, I guess." I nodded, giving him space to continue if he wanted to. "He thinks I've made progress," Michael added after a moment, in understanding why I let her isolate me from you, from everyone. Really, it was true. During the months of his engagement, Michael had drifted away from not just me, but his friends, his colleagues, anyone who might have seen through Renee's facade. "I'm glad," I said simply. We worked together to finish preparing dinner, moving around each other in the familiar space. The conversation flowed more easily now than it had in those first awkward weeks after the wedding that wasn't. We still avoided certain topics. Renee's name rarely came up, but the silence between us had lost its heaviness. As we sat down to eat, Michael poured wine for both of us. "I have some news," he said, a hint of nervousness in his voice. I raised my eyebrows, waiting. "I've been offered a position at the Seattle office." It would mean relocating Seattle across the country. My heart constricted painfully, but I kept my expression neutral. "That's a wonderful opportunity," I said carefully. "When would you start?" "March, if I accept." He studied my face. "I wanted to talk to you about it first. 3 months ago, he wouldn't have consulted me. He would have made the decision with Renee and presented it as a fait accompli. This was growth. It's your career, Michael, your life. You should make the decision that's best for you." He twisted his napkin, a habit from childhood when he was anxious. "After everything that happened, I don't want you to think I'm abandoning you, running away." The old me might have used this moment to express hurt, to subtly pressure him to stay. The new me recognized his need to forge his own path. "I would never think that," I assured him. "This is exactly what you should be doing at this stage of your life. Exploring opportunities, taking risks." Relief washed over his face. "Really? You'd be okay if I moved?" I reached across the table and took his hand. Michael, I raised you to be independent, to make your own way in the world. That hasn't changed. I squeezed his fingers gently. Besides, Seattle has airports. I hear they've even invented this thing called video calling. He laughed, the tension draining from his shoulders. I'd want you to visit. Often, I like that, and I would. The thought of exploring a new city, of seeing my son build a new life there, it held appeal rather than anxiety. We ate, the conversation turning to lighter topics, a movie he'd seen, a book I was reading, the neighbor's new puppy that barked at all hours. Normal, everyday exchanges that felt precious after what we'd been through. After dinner, as Michael washed dishes and I dried, he said quietly, I've been thinking about something Dr. Levine said, about how sometimes the people who hurt us the most are the ones we need to thank. I looked at him questioningly. Not because they deserve thanks, he clarified, but because they force us to grow in ways we wouldn't have otherwise. I nodded slowly. I understand that. Before all this happened, I never really saw you as a complete person. You were mom, just mom, not Eleanor Johnson. A woman with her own life, her own strengths. He handed me the last plate. I think I needed to lose you to realize who you really are. His words touched something deep within me. Because in a way, I had needed to lose him too, to see him not as my little boy who could do no wrong, but as a flawed adult capable of both hurting me and healing that hurt. We're going to be okay, you know, I said, hanging the dish towel to dry. Whatever you decide about Seattle, whatever comes next later. After Michael had gone home to his apartment, I returned to the porch with a fresh cup of tea. The night was clear, stars emerging in the deep blue sky. In the quiet darkness, I reflected on how differently things might have turned out if I hadn't found Harold's old phone, if my friends hadn't rallied around me, if Michael hadn't been willing to see the truth about Renee. But there was no point in dwelling on what might have been. The reality was enough. I had my house, my son, and a sense of self stronger than ever before. Harriet had asked me recently if I regretted not pressing charges against Michael and Renee. They deserved consequences, she'd insisted. Still protective, still angry on my behalf. There were consequences, I told her, just not the kind that involved courtrooms. For Renee, the consequence was losing the prize she thought she'd won: Michael, his income, his future. My house. For Michael, it was a painful process of recognizing how he'd been manipulated, of rebuilding his life and our relationship brick by brick. And for me, I had faced my deepest fear: being silenced, being erased, and emerged stronger. I had discovered friends whose loyalty went beyond words to action. I had learned that even at 70, I wasn't finished becoming who I was meant to be. The soft chime of my phone interrupted my thoughts. A text from Gloria, bridge tomorrow. Harriet's bringing her famous lemon bars. I smiled as I typed my reply. Wouldn't miss it. The house behind me was quiet, solid. Mine, the future with its Seattle visits, senior center activities, Thursday dinners with my son stretched before me. Uncertain but full of possibility. They had tried to silence me, to hide me away. Instead, they had given me the gift of my own voice.